Hi everyone, and welcome to this video where we look at another member of my classic computer collection. And today's model is a computer that I never regarded as a classic. I always felt it was just a model in a series of models that added an incremental improvement over the previous one. But once I got to own one and play around with it and do a little bit of digging and find out more information about it, I've come to the conclusion that it's actually quite a significant model. So it does deserve the title of classic computer in my book. It is the Mac Plus. So let's have a look at it. The Mac Plus was released in 1986, but actually its story starts 2 years earlier with the original Macintosh, seen here with its champion, Steve Jobs. This was the insanely great machine Jobs poured his abundant passion into, and he saw the Mac as a beacon of innovation amongst the grey mediocrity of the IBM PCs and XTs and their MS-DOS clones, which were then dominating the business and professional personal computer market. Surely every professional and business manager would want a Mac. I mean, who wouldn't? Unfortunately for Steve, passion was not enough, and despite the hype, the original Macintosh had serious limitations in this target marketplace. The graphical interface was resource-hungry, and the meagre 128 kilobytes of RAM and single 400 kilobyte capacity disk drive required plenty of disk swapping to get anything done. Even with an external drive, performance was slow and software was hard to come by. It just didn't cut it when stacked against hard drive-capable PC-DOS or MS-DOS XT type machines with a sea of business software. Even the next model up, the Fat Mac, with 512 kilobytes of RAM, was seriously under-resourced. The upshot of this was that the business market saw the Mac largely as a toy, and sales were way below expectations. Furthermore, at Steve Jobs' insistence, the machine was hard to expand, so following an upgrade path was difficult. Ironically, Steve Jobs was gone from Apple when the Plus came out, but with that model, the Macintosh finally became a computer that could take on the IBM juggernaut, at least in some fields. It wasn't just the 1 megabyte of RAM that you could expand up to 4 gigabytes, or the 800 kilobyte capacity disk drive, which was twice as much as before. But in my opinion, there was one other change which was even more significant: the addition of a SCSI port. This addition meant that the Mac Plus could be matched up with a hard drive, and these hard drives did become available. When a Mac Plus was mated with a hard drive, you really did have a machine that could go head-to-head with the IBM XTs and ATs as far as speed and capacity was concerned. The Mac finally became a useful productivity tool, particularly in specialist areas where its graphical user interface and its what you see is what you get mode of operating gave it a distinct advantage. There was another Apple innovation that came out in 1985, which helped the Mac Plus find its wings. This was the LaserWriter laser printer. This innovative printer, with its PostScript language, gave high-quality copy at a reasonable price. It could be networked to a number of machines and ideally suited the graphical nature of document and image production on the Mac. Okay, so that's enough of the history, so let's have a look at my machine, and you can see the Mac Plus there, mated up with a hard drive. It's not an Apple hard drive, but it's a third-party one. Makes a nice little stand for it to rest on. You can see the keyboard there. It has a numeric keypad. This was something new for the Macs. It's in really good condition. I actually rescued it from a loft of a school that was being renovated. But there's no sign of yellowing. It's in pretty good nick. It's just a close-up of the hard drive. And there it is from the other side. So coming around the back, you can see there the vents in the top. The machine doesn't have a fan, so those vents are quite important. It can heat up in there. One thing I like is that it's got a battery, but the battery's very accessible. So unlike the later Macs, where it's on the motherboard itself, you can replace the battery quite easily in this one. So there's the label telling us exactly what it is and what model number we're dealing with. Further down we have the ports, one for sound, one for the mouse, one for plugging in an external disk drive, SCSI port, one for printing and one for local networking. And there you can see the connectors on the SCSI external hard drive. You can see that block-shaped object at the bottom there. That's a terminating resistor because I haven't got anything else plugged into this SCSI drive. You can daisy chain these devices. So we'll just plug our SCSI drive in and our mouse in and fire the beast up. I'm holding the camera with one hand here, so this is a delicate operation. So it's our SCSI attached. We'll just plug the mouse in now. And there we go, we're all set. Perhaps just one more thing before we finish. I'll show you the other side. There's a little piece of plastic down here. It actually just slides into the vents, but it has two long pins on it. These pins are poised above two buttons, and so pushing these will enable you to reset the machine or provide an interrupt, whatever that means. It's always good to throw a few naked pictures into these videos. So this is what the Mac Plus looks like with the case off. So you can see a nicely designed unit there with the screen, the vertical analog board. That is a source of grief for a lot of Mac Plus owners because the solder joints, particularly on the connectors, tend to get a bit frail on them and cause all sorts of problems. So if you've got a dead Mac Plus, it's probably one of these solder connectors on the analog board. This doesn't have the leaky capacitor problem that later Macs do. A single disk drive there. What a neat package. And here's the main board. The main board sits at the bottom of the Mac. You can see there the SIMs, and the Mac Plus was the first Macintosh to use SIMs. These are single inline memory modules that became very common on lots of machines later on. So let's fire up our Mac. I've got the hard disk drive turned on already. Now you notice it looks a bit pinky in colour, and that's because I have played around with some of the filters because I wanted to get the screen looking as natural as possible. It's normally, of course, a grayscale colour, and what I found was that it tended to be blue. It's still got a bit of a bluish tinge, but it's a little more normal or natural with this colour filter. So it's causing the unit to be a bit reddish, but the screen is a little more natural. So there's our happy Mac. So it's well on the way to booting up. Certainly nowhere near as fast as my Macintosh SE30, but I wouldn't expect it to be. Just preloading some programs. And there we have our Mac interface. This is Mac System 6 that it's running on. So we can just have a look at the capabilities here. Give some data, and you can see that it's got a nice, healthy 4 megabytes to play around with there. So a very capable Mac Plus. So I just thought I'd show you some of the things on this hard drive, which are pretty typical of a Macintosh, say between 1986 and 1989. I've got Microsoft Word here. This is a 1989 version, but the original Mac Plus had MacWrite, which was quite similar, stripped down word processor, of course. This is HyperCard. HyperCard was, I think, a really undervalued piece of software that came out on the Mac. I actually used it in one of my teaching simulations where I produced this virtual plant where students could click on various bits and pieces and see what was what. And I used HyperCard with that. I actually teamed up with someone else in my university, and we had a great application for the students to use. I'm just showing you a little HyperCard stack here. This is just a simple game, a little quote game, so you can try and guess who who said that quote. So it was ideal for building quizzes, and it had a lot of application in education. If you want to know more, just Google it. It was a great package. So I'll just show you loading a file from a disk. And this is really for younger people that aren't familiar with Macintoshes at all. And so floppy disk went in, you got an icon, click the icon, and showed you what files were in it. Click the file, whatever was associated with it would run. Now that doesn't seem very remarkable, but the fact is that, when you're talking about 1986, mid-80s to late 80s, that was way ahead of what you could do on a PC clone in the IBM PC market. It was way ahead. And even word processing, here we are in Word, and I'm just making this title bold. Very easy, using drop-down menus. I can see the bold. So it's what you see is what you get. But that's not what you got in the PC world. You didn't have this sort of ease of use. That had to wait until Windows 3.1 and around about 1993. In the PC world, in the late 80s, if you were using a word processing package, you got something like this. So this is WordPerfect. So you might have got menus if you did have a mouse. You could use them, but it wasn't what you see is what you get. So as you typed, as you edited, you could format, and usually that involved on the screen, seeing the words in different colours, or with some sort of background. You could often do a print preview, but it wasn't anywhere near as intuitive to use as something like this. So from that period in the late 80s through to, say, Windows 3.1 on the PCs, the Macs just had it all over the PCs as far as ease of use are concerned. Now, one of the things that always made me uncomfortable using Macs was the method used to eject the disk. And of course you drag it down into the rubbish tin, and that always to me said delete. So it was a bit of a sort of mind shift. It made one feel a little bit uneasy when using the Macs. Keyboard's good to type on. You can see here doing some of that. Nice machines to use. So now we go to the manuals. Now, as with all Apple manuals, they're beautifully produced, almost a work of art in themselves, really nicely laid out. This user manual is more about the machine, really, what the various ports do, how to set it up, how to look after your machine. It tends to focus more on that than the software or the operating system itself. It does have a little bit about the operating system there, but I think because Macs were relatively easy to use, you could sort of just plonk them down and by playing around or exploring them, pretty much get going. So, quite intuitive for their time. So that's the user manual. So this is a utilities manual. So when you got your software, which in this case is System 6, you did get a lot of utility programs with it, and this manual deals with all those utilities. So things like formatting your hard drive, for example, those sorts of useful programs just for file management and other things like that. And what else have we got? We've got this is the user manual for the system software, so the disk operating system, if you like. So goes into it in quite a bit of detail as to what all the bits and pieces are, like the systems folder, what's in there. So anyone that wants more advanced knowledge can go into this manual and get to grips with the nuts and bolts of the system software. But for the person who just wants to use the machine, really they just needed to sit down and start to play with it. And finally, I've got the HyperCard manual that completes the set of 4. As you can see, the manual's nicely laid out. They're all themed, and they all look as if they're of the same family. So Apple produced very attractive manuals. So how did the Mac Plus do in the marketplace? Actually, it did very well. It lasted from 1986 through to 1990. And although there was another couple of models, the Mac SE and the Mac SE30, both had inbuilt hard drives, the Mac Plus was still offered as a cheaper option. It didn't manage to knock the MS-DOS clones or the IBM PCs or XTs or ATs off their perch. They still remained the dominant machines in the business market, but it did carve out a niche for itself, and this was because of its graphical user interface and the fact that when you worked on documents on a Macintosh, you could format the document and lay it out exactly as it would appear when it's printed, and you could do it relatively cheaply and relatively easily. So it really invented this whole niche market, this niche area of desktop publishing. So in the creative industries where this sort of thing was important, like academia, publishing industries, small firms that were producing magazines, etc., the Macintosh really thrived in this environment and carved out a market for itself, and essentially enabled Apple to survive the 1980s. Well, I hope you enjoyed that look at the Mac Plus. So until next time, keep well, and we'll see you in the next video.